Hello, this is Mike, the Erudite DM, and I have almost what's a response video, or maybe a continuation or a part two, if you choose to look at it that way, for a video I did just 2 days ago. And it was the beginning of a limited series, I'll grant you, on weapons for Shadowdark, maybe additional weapons. And I was aware you can find some of these weapons already in expansions. There's so many supplements and other guides out there and things you can buy on drive through or from other sources that have done the same thing. But I have a couple of my favorite weapons, and I simply wanted to give you my take on these. The first one I started with was the Falchion, a really heavy chopping meat cleaver type blade from the Middle Ages that was used in France and Italy and Germany and so forth, and all throughout the 100 Years' War, or at least part of the 100 Years' War. So I got some great responses to this, and this is really what I've been after with this channel all along, is not just building community and getting some of you back, like Michael at Chthonic Musings or Brad Utterstrom, or gosh, there's so many. I'm not going to mention everybody, but some of them are going to be pointed out here. So let's jump into the critique of the Falchion. This is going to be very short. I put a couple of screens together and some shots for you to consider. I had proposed that in Shadowdark, if you were going to use this Falchion weapon, which is this blunt, well, that's not really true. It's not blunt, but it is meant as a bludgeoning, chopping type weapon that could cut through armor because it was weighted at the end of the blade. Think of a machete and then add a lot more weight to it, a lot more effectiveness in combat, and it kind of has that shape. I'll put the link to the other video so you can go watch it, and it's only 10 or 15 minutes. But here's what I'd come up with. I said it was going to be a D8 weapon in my version. It would be one-handed. It would cost about half the price of a long sword, possibly as low as 5 gold pieces. It's not a fancy weapon. It is not a weapon you would use to show off your wealth or your reputation. It's a very practical weapon between a sword and a battle axe. It would only cost 1 slot. And because we're using it one-handed, it would leave you room for a shield, although it might require a full-size human being or a larger person, maybe a stronger, a higher strength person. So there are some restrictions: no halflings, goblins, or other kobolds, gnomes. Smaller races would struggle with a weapon this heavy. A dwarf might even have a problem with it just because the length of the weapon, but maybe I'd let a dwarf get away with using the Falchion. But certainly weaker characters and small characters could not safely use this in one hand. You could get away with trying to use it as a two-handed weapon, but this is where some of the complexity comes in, is from some of the comments, is that there are pros and cons to these things. And before I jump into the pros and cons in the comments, let me just say Shadowdark is meant to be less crunchy. This isn't Pathfinder or Axe 2 or other games that have very highly tactical renditions of melee and ranged combat. It is simple and fast, and that's a thing we all love playing Shadowdark. I do as well, but I like other flavorful, colorful weaponry to choose from, because I think if you're going to play this game for any length of time, you're going to get bored fairly quickly picking between the same handful of weapons. So having other weapons from the real world and used in these the ancient period, like a Kopesh or something in the medieval range, like some of those, the Falchion, others I'm going to lay out here in the next week or two. I think that adds some choices that a lot of players will like. If you don't like this and you want to go in there, you want to roll dice, and you don't care if it's a spear or whatever, you just care what the damage does and whether it's ranged or a melee weapon, good for you. Stay with that and do what you're doing. This probably isn't going to be your video. But if you want a weapon that tells a story, that says something about your view of the world, says something about your experience in combat and how you view opponents and what deathly harm you want to do to them, then this might be right up your alley. So I just wanted to note that in a rules light game, there's only so many choices you can make, right? You look when you're choosing weapons. Is it ranged? Is it a melee weapon? Do I get any kind of advantages or disadvantages with this weapon? And most importantly, how much damage does it do? I remember being a young person, probably in high school, playing Advanced Dungeons and Dragons around 1988 to 81, 82. And I think the Bardiche was my favorite weapon for a while. And it's one of those I want to talk about for Shadowdark later. But it was because of the damage. I believe it was 3d6 for the damage. I don't know. I'll check my books back there. I've got my old player's handbook and my dungeon master's guide. So I think a lot is true. A lot of this is true as well with Shadowdark. When you're rolling up a character and generating a new character and you're picking your weapons, you're probably looking for what kind of damage your class can do. First off, you're looking at class restrictions. What am I limited to as far as a combat weapon of choice? And then I want to get the most bang for my buck, right? I want to try to kill stuff. I don't want to do D4 if I can help it, like a dagger. I want to try to do some serious damage and put the thing down before it kills me. So it's kill or be killed. So that being said, that was one of my caveats. Let's jump into the comments here. And I had some great comments from some regulars and some new folks too. This is Brad Utterstrom, the great Brad Yu, who I've never really spoken with. I probably will at some point. I've got to know him through the Facebook Shadowdark page, as well as he joined on to the channel here, and he makes videos himself. You should go subscribe and check out his channel. And really, if you're watching my stuff, pay attention to the comments. I mean, I have ideas and I throw them out there, but there's lots of gold sometimes in the comments section of my videos, because I've got some people that have a more extensive RPG experience than mine, or they're coming from other sides of it and they're bringing value into some of the suggestions I come up with, whether it's lore or zines or weapons videos like this. So what did Brad say? He said, interesting history lesson. I have to admit, I really know nothing about any of this stuff, after I set him up to be an expert. That's how he starts. Thanks, Brad. Everything I know about medieval tools is directly from RPGs. Haha. As far as realistic stat line for it, I think it's important that it doesn't outdo the longsword. That's the most important thing he said here. And it really made me pause and think about what I presented last time with the Falchion. He says, and if it's a D8 weapon causing 8 points of damage that costs less than a longsword, then strictly statistically, people would pick the Falchion over the longsword. I think that's true for what I just stated a few moments ago. It becomes an evaluation and a question about how many damage points, what's the max damage this weapon will give me. He says, so for me, you'd need a downside. I'm thinking of two different possibilities. And before I touch on these possibilities, that spark made me think too. Thank you, Brad, for posting that. Is, when I'm looking at a weapon to add to the game, or anything else to add to this game or any other game for my own homebrew, I have to think about balance. I can't just think of advantages, or I can't just think of a disadvantage. I've got to match those together to create some sort of realistic analog to add to the game, right? That adds value. But with everything, with every pro, there's a con. So balance is very important. And I think he was correct here. Now, here's what he suggested. He said, to me, this sort of simulates, number one, these are his possible edits to the Falchion. Number one, it breaks on a natural one. That's an interesting idea. It's a powerful, heavy cleaving, chopping weapon, but it's not a finesse weapon, and it's not very well made. That's why it's so inexpensive. And a lot of men-at-arms and fighters could get them easily. Although knights carried them too as a secondary weapon for hacking through giant melees at times. So maybe number one, it breaks on a natural one, etc. He says, to me, this sort of simulates what you said about needing to sharpen it all the time. Remember that for later. Maybe it doesn't have the longevity of nicer weapons and is more likely to be rendered unusable. That's exciting. I like that idea, right? Because I said it's not crafted from what we knew of it like a well-made arming sword, a high-end sword that a knight or a noble would carry. That's ideal for combat and finely tuned and balanced for striking and for parrying and for attacking and so forth. So the other possibility he mentions is number two. Maybe you need a minimum strength. Maybe you need a 12 or more strength to even use the Falchion in the first place. So then it's only available to characters with a strength bonus. All really good stuff, and I like these ideas. Those were important, Brad. I appreciate him. Now I haven't spoken to him. This was only 2 days ago, but I imagine at some point he and I will compare notes. But it sure got my mind reeling and thinking here about the Falchion, what I had proposed, and maybe I need an edit, which I'm often doing with my zines, which you can find on drive-through, or other ideas I propose here in these fun videos. Then I had another new user that I say a new user, a subscriber, and maybe I don't know the subscriber as well. Let me see if I can adjust this somehow, the screen, because I'm not seeing the name there. Where do I get rid of all this junk? No, that's not really helping. Anyway, the name of the subscriber is Meerthif, Merethif, who's not a YouTuber, but certainly a gamer, and I appreciate him or her following the channel. So they made the comment at first about, hey, Western Reaches, the new Kickstarter that we're getting in little pieces here and there through the Cursed Scrolls and some PDFs through the Kickstarter, but we haven't gotten the whole release yet from Arcane Library and for Shadowdark. It will have a Falchion in it. Unfortunately, it's some sort of Japanese sword thing and is unlike anything we would recognize as a historical Falchion in our games. So maybe we won't wait for that one. Although Meerthif does point out another game by Free League, which I'd heard of, but I've never really looked at. It's called Black Powder and Brimstone. There it is. If any of you have tried this or played this game, it sounds really interesting, but I've only done a cursory glance, and it sounds a little like a Merkborg meets, a more OSR game, pick your poison, whichever one you like. I'm going to check it out, though. Might be an interesting game and something else to consider. I don't know really anything about that system, but it is from, as I said, from Free League. So check that out. And sorry, back to Meerthif. So this is the interesting point. So you may want to check out Black Powder and Brimstone system for its approach. Its system is running on the Merkborg engine with grimdark Warhammer-like setting, if that gives you a little more idea of what Black Powder and Brimstone actually is. The Falchion in that game is indeed called a Messer, which is the German term. And even though it is only a D6 weapon, it deals 2 points of damage on the initial strike because of its bulk, thanks to its bulk. And we said it is heavier. It is a striking weapon, and it's a stunning weapon, and it should smash and cut at the same time in melee. However, due to its weight, it has a -1 to hit for the rest of the combat until you rest for a turn. I don't know if I like that. That's a little too limiting, but I do like this idea of maybe its benefit is all in its initial strike. And then after that, you have to think about, sharpening the thing, or, maybe it breaks easily. It emulates brutality of the weapon, but it also has a lack of finesse. With its heavy hitting initial strike, it's great for short, brutal combats, but it's lacking in prolonged duels with fancy footwork. Yes, I would never, ever choose a Falchion for a dueling weapon or any other big, bulky weapon that doesn't give me speed and reflexive actions. So if you look at the City of Masks, the new Cursed Scroll, I think it's number 6 from Arcane Library. It just was released yesterday if you did the Kickstarter, and they have a new duelist class in there. I think I'm going to do a quick review and run through the PDF, and I'll probably do another video on that maybe in the next few days before the weekend or over the weekend. Anyway, so I really appreciate Meerthif and Brad Utterstrom chiming in here and giving us some ideas on the Falchion. And these things, all these ideas I propose, again, they're a work in progress. I want feedback. I want ideas. Your ideas, might be very well better than mine, my initial idea. So I welcome the input. Let's look at some options then that we could consider if we're going to have a balanced appraisal of this big, heavy chopping weapon that was used in armored combat. How would we do this in Shadowdark? Well, it should be balanced, should be negatives and positives, right, to using the weapon. And here's kind of a summary I put together, and these are for you to consider. And I want to hear from you in the comments which of these you like the best, which of them you would pick, and probably not a combination of these things. Probably just choose one. The first one would be it does break. Maybe the weapon breaks on a crit 1 or a crit 1, 2, or 3 or something. That's a negative. You know that it's not going to last forever. It is a big, heavy chopper. But because it's cheaply made and you paid half the price of that longsword for it, it's not going to sustain you that long in ongoing heavy combat. It will break at some point. The second choice is maybe it has an advantage, and this is a positive. Maybe it has an advantage on your first damage roll of the combat, only the first one for the initial shock of striking with the Falchion. I like that. A similar positive benefit maybe be, this feels maybe a little too strong, is you have advantage on your first attack roll of the combat because of that initial shock again. I think I like the damage roll idea better. Giving advantage on the first attack seems a little too heavy, but I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. The fourth one is, and this is a negative, it has to be sharpened between melees. Okay, so there's your fighter between melees, or it loses its positive benefit. So maybe you lose, it becomes a -1 on attack rolls when it's unsharpened. Right, so you fight the orcs with your companions, and you're down in the dungeon, and you're going down the hallway. Well, give me a few minutes, or when you take a rest, you've got to sharpen that thing. That requires a little more bookkeeping. We're not getting too crunchy here for Shadowdark. I think you could easily just mark on your character sheet or on a notepad if you're playing on a VTT or something. You could mark that sharp, unsharp. When was the last time I sharpened this thing? And you get your whetstone out, and you're sharpening the blade lengthwise and trying to knock out all the dents and the dings and the knocks in that blade, so it's smoother and still has that impactful first strike. If I was going with that for the positive, that's an interesting one. I like the idea, though, and keep in mind I'm a really utilitarian guy, and I like gear. I like managing my gear and thinking about what items and how much it weighs, and even petty items, things that I can put in pockets that don't count against your gear slots. But most of my characters carry a flask and a pipe, and might have they might have dice with them, things like that. Doesn't cost a gear slot, but I like that. And you may not. And if you don't, like I said in the beginning, hey man, totally cool. Don't do it. Don't do it if it's not your thing. And then the last potential option for the Falchion is a strength requirement, maybe a minimum 12. Is that too high? Is that too low for you to even wield it? So weaker characters, it's not even really a choice. So this is a negative, right? This is part of the balancing here. These are the options. Look through them. I will put them in the show notes again, so you don't have to go back to the screen here to find this. I'll put a link to Brad's channel in there as well, and a link to Black Powder and Brimstone. So everything we've talked about here, you can check out. So ironically, I think the follow-up video may be longer than the original video on the Falchion because I talked too long. So apologies. I hope you find this useful. I hope you like the video and go back and watch the first one if you haven't seen it, and watch for the other weapons videos I'm going to put out, because there are different weapons from other parts of Europe and other parts of the world that we're not as familiar with as a claymore or a broadsword or a longsword or a battle axe and the spear and so forth. Although they all tend to have certain versions of those weapons through the ancient period into the Middle Ages and so forth. So we'll talk with you real soon. I appreciate you watching the video. Do like and subscribe, and tell your friends if they're into Shadowdark that Erudite DM is a good place to learn more about it. And we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.